What is up, ladies and gentlemen? My name is Jerichoholic8704, here to give you something new to the Jerichoholic8704 YouTube channel. Now, you guys know from probably the months of September to May, I kind of become dormant on this website because of just all the stuff I'm doing at college. And it's not like the work is mind-bendingly difficult. It just takes a lot of energy for me to keep my grades up and do all the work I'm doing and do all the plays that I'm in and stuff like that. So I just don't have time to just really get invested in stuff like that. But I kind of want to keep it up because it's a hobby and it's fun and stuff like that. So my plan, especially during the university season, if you will, is to do kind of videos like this. And this one I'm bringing to you and a couple more in the future of just random topics to talk about, try to keep the video under 10 minutes or so, and actually start a discussion in the comments. And if there's a certain topic about pro wrestling that you want me to talk about, whether it just be something like, wrestling gear or the lack of pyro or anything stupid like that, put in the comments and I will definitely try and talk about it. But the first one I want to talk about today is wrestling and geek culture. And when I say geek culture, I basically mean wrestling has kind of, over the years, in the mid 2010s and stuff like that, wrestling has kind of become something more of a nerdy activity. Something like, I don't know, anime or video games or something like that. And the thing about wrestling and geek culture is it's just a product, one, of it no longer becoming popular, and two, having such a hardcore following. So wrestling in the late 80s and the late 90s was the in thing. It was cool, and then it slowly started to fade in popularity. And we see this happen all the time. I mean, if we can make a quick comparison to like something like Pokemon, Pokemon was huge when it initially started in the late 90s, and then it had a resurgence with Pokemon Go where everyone was playing it. And now in 2017, it's come to the point where I'm playing Pokemon Go on my phone. People are like, oh, you're still playing? And it's because I'm just such a devout Pokemon fan. I've been playing it since I was literally like a small child. I can't, like, similar to wrestling, I can't remember a time where I wasn't playing Pokemon. You know what I mean? So it's almost become, because it had such a big following, because it was kind of like a cultural phenomenon, especially in the 80s and 90s, when, you had such a huge following, when there were such big household names like Hulk Hogan and The Rock and Stone Cold Steve Austin, it's something everyone enjoyed, but then you get shunned for still liking it because it's no longer as cool as it used to be. So right off the bat, you're creating already like a subculture for wrestling. In and of itself, it's no longer something it's not just like a TV show that has just like an audience. It's almost become an us versus them mentality. And I mean, that this is also the fault of wrestling fans and non-wrestling fans, because wrestling fans will, defend wrestling to its death. And I think on the opposite end of the spectrum, non-wrestling fans can look down on wrestling and not take a moment to see what it actually is. There's almost like a balance that needs to be created. Sometimes wrestling fans take it too seriously, and sometimes non-wrestling fans just see it as, Hillbilly Bob and Huckleberry Jim just pounding each other in the face with their overalls. You know what I mean? Like, they just see it as just a redneck, kind of entertainment thing, which really isn't true for either end of the spectrum. But still, you're creating this us versus them mentality. And no longer, the thing about wrestling is it's already starting to be marketed at geek gear stores. A place like Hot Topic has a bunch of WWE and New Japan shirts. And I mean, no one ever wants to admit to going to a Hot Topic, you know what I mean? Because it's seen as just such a nerdy, teenager, geeky store. And the thing about it is all that's left are the hardcores. And this is the audience they have to feed to. And this is really only the audience that wrestling has left. There are very little casual wrestling fans. And if there are casual wrestling fans, they're not going to go to Hot Topic to get their big Cass shirt. You know what I mean? So, and the problem is, if it's seen as nerdy, what are the hopes of ever expanding your audience? Especially because wrestling fans get so much shit. You know what I mean? And I mean, I will defend pro wrestling till the end of time, but I'm also willing to point out when it has its faults. Sometimes wrestling isn't the very elegant, dramatic art form that I think it is. I mean, like, in my English class, freshman year of college, I wrote a 10-page paper on why wrestling should be considered an art form, and why it's not just mindless entertainment. Why? And I broke down, I picked some certain matches, I broke down the story, I explained why things work, I explained the psychology of wrestling, I explained, like certain aspects of wrestling, like getting heat and, like hot tags and stuff like, just very basic stuff like that, that even though I've never set a foot in the business, I can still see it as an audience member, you know what I mean? But people aren't willing to look at that because of the culture behind wrestling. because it's either A, just a bunch of beer chugging rednecks, or it's B, a bunch of geeky nerds who, don't know how to interact with the outside world watching this thing. And if you're marketing your product towards those groups, you can't get more people invested in it. You can't make it a universal entertainment. And the thing about it is wrestlers themselves, they aren't that cool anymore. And and it really has nothing to do with the topic I'm discussing about this geek culture thing. But, people really can't get invested. There's no longer a wide variety of characters. I feel like a lot of people are kind of blending together, and it's not to say not everyone has a definitive look. Like Kevin Owens definitely has a definitive look and stuff like that. But wrestlers like the Young Bucks and Kenny Omega, who kind of look like average Joes, to me those are the coolest guys in the world, because I am a skinny white kid with long hair. You know what I mean? Like, I look like the Young Bucks. You know what I mean? But it's come to the point where you can look like Zack Sabre Jr. and get booked on any show. Wrestlers themselves are no longer, larger than life cool. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. I don't think it's horrible that we don't have, roided out guys who are looking like freaks of nature. I wouldn't want that. I would rather want guys who are more down to earth looking. But, aside from their look, that's one end of the spectrum. But I mean, especially in WWE, where no one's allowed to be cool anymore. Everyone's a geek because they make them nerds. So if there's no one to get behind, and that's the thing, wrestling didn't become super popular and super, out of this world because in the Attitude Era, they were putting on classic matches. No, that had nothing to do with it. It was because you had the two greatest baby faces, The Rock and Stone Cold Steve Austin, with the greatest heel, Vince McMahon. That is what captivated the audience. It's not about the matches they had. It wasn't about how good of a classic Triple H versus The Rock was at SummerSlam. It was a great match, but do you think like the great 5-star technical classics are what hooked the audience in? No, it's not what hooked the audience in. That's what makes them stay. But no, what hooks them in are the larger-than-life characters, the really cool personalities, the aspiration of wanting to be like that person. You know what I mean? So many people probably wanted to be Stone Cold Steve Austin, to be that badass, to be the dude that tells their boss to fuck off, stuff like that. But there's none of that left. And again, that's not saying this is a bad thing. I'm not saying the wrestlers today are just losers. And I mean, there's so many wrestlers that I love, and I think they're the coolest people in the world. The Young Bucks, Kenny Omega, Okada, Seth Rollins, Sami Zayn, I even think is like cool in a sense, because I'm kind of like Sami Zayn in a way. Hiroshi Tanahashi, the biggest white meat babyface ever. You know what I mean? He's the coolest guy in the world to me. You're marketing towards a very small audience, and you're playing to them when you should be playing in a universal sense. Because even if we have a bunch of fans hop on because they think one particular wrestler is cool, if that one wrestler is cool, everyone's going to think he's cool. And if you're marketing towards one specific audience, you're not going to be able to grow your product. And that's why wrestling is kind of in the situation it is now, where you're just basically looked at as a loser for liking it because, oh, it's fake, it's phony. But that really has nothing to do with it. When you go on there and you see all these wrestlers, like there are so many times where I've watched WWE, and because I'm an RA, residents come into my room a lot to ask me questions, and if they need help with stuff, people walk into my room, and sometimes I just, the point of my job is to build a relationship with everyone in the dorm. So sometimes I'll just have my door open, and they'll walk in when I'm watching Raw or SmackDown, and it's so embarrassing to watch all this bad acting and just completely over the top, trying to be something it's not, trying to make wrestling into something that no one sees it as, and everyone wants something out of wrestling, and it's that cool factor, it's that larger than life factor, and I feel like that's missing nowadays because you're marketing towards the geek culture that wants, the 5-star technical classics, and there's nothing wrong with that. I want to see great matches, but in order to grow your product, in order to make wrestling something big, in order to make it as cool as it was in the late 90s and the late 80s, you have to have that hook, and that's missing. So yeah, that's basically my view on that. I want to end this video before it hits the 10-minute mark. So feel free to talk in the comments about this all, and feel free to leave other topics you want me to talk about. But my name is Jerichoholic8704, and I will see all of you guys later.